All right, so today we're diving into something pretty fascinating, to say the least. Mangroves, shrimp, and how they all kind of intertwine in this thing called Indonesian silvofishery.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
You sent over some research on this, and I have to say, I was hooked from the first page.
It's definitely a rabbit hole worth going down. But what we're talking about, this silverfishery, it's really a pretty clever approach when you think about it. Essentially, it's about raising shrimp and milkfish, yeah, but doing it within mangrove forests. Imagine that.
So instead of just clearing out the mangroves to make room for, those big shrimp ponds, they're actually trying to find a way to make them coexist.
Exactly. That's the whole idea. It's about figuring out how to use these natural resources, right, for economic benefit, but obviously not destroying the environment in the process. It's a tough balance to strike, for sure. This kind of trying to find that sweet spot where you have profit, but also keep the ecological integrity intact.
And this research, it zooms in on like a specific spot
Yeah.
in Indonesia, right?
Right, yeah. Blonkon.
Blonaken.
It's in West Java.
Okay, West Java.
Yeah.
So what makes this place so unique? Is it just the mangroves themselves, or is there something else going on?
Well, it's not just the mangroves, no. It's also about who's actually managing them, who's in charge of those decisions. We're looking at rural villages, and the mangrove areas, they fall under, well, they call it PHBM, basically a community forestry program.
PHBM. Okay, that sounds like one of those acronyms you need a decoder ring for. Break that down for me. Community Forestry Program. What does that even mean?
Think of it like a local co-op, where the community itself and the government, in this case it's Perhutani, which is the state forestry corporation, they work together.
Okay.
They have to balance the needs of the people who are directly relying on those mangroves, right, for their livelihoods, with the, national interest, the country's interest in managing those resources.
I can already see where this is going. There's got to be some interesting power dynamics at play there, right? But before we get to the shrimp part of this whole equation, let's talk about those mangroves for a second. This research really seems to hammer home the point that they are ecologically important.
Absolutely.
It's not just about having a few trees around, right?
No, not at all. Mangroves are, well, they're like the VIPs of coastal ecosystems. They're like the providers. They're the grocery stores. They're the nurseries. They're the apartment complexes all rolled into one.
Wow.
They provide food and shelter and a place for all this marine life to breed and thrive.
Especially our little Trump friends, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Exactly. Mangroves are like, they create this perfect environment for shrimp to, do their thing. And of course, countless other species benefit too.
And get this, the study found that, are you ready for this? A whopping 86% of what mangroves produce gets recycled right back into the ecosystem. Talk about an efficient system.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's one of the big reasons why mangroves are so amazingly productive. Everything is connected, like the leaves that fall off the trees, branches, even, dead organisms. It all breaks down, it all gets recycled, and those nutrients just feed the whole system. It's this beautifully efficient cycle.
Okay, that is seriously impressive. But let's get down to business here. Let's talk about the shrimp. This research looked at two main types of shrimp production. Right. You've got your natural shrimp, which is your wild caught, and then you have your farmed shrimp.
Right.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the relationship with those mangroves, it was different for each type of shrimp.
Yeah, you're right. It is interesting. For natural shrimp, the wild ones, the study found a very, very clear connection. More mangroves equals more shrimp. In fact, for every hectare of mangrove, you're looking at almost 4 kilos more shrimp.
Whoa, hold on. So that's like, what, like a football field of mangroves could mean an extra, like, 9 pounds of shrimp or something?
Yeah, something like that.
That's a pretty straightforward message, wouldn't you say?
It is. It tells us that destroying mangroves has a direct impact on those natural shrimp populations. You can't really escape that connection.
Makes sense. But then we get to the farm shrimp, and it sounds like things get a little murkier, a little more complicated, right?
That's where things get a little trickier for sure. Mangroves still matter, but what this study suggests is that other factors, like how they manage those shrimp ponds, they play a bigger role when it comes to production, at least in this particular area, in this Indonesian context. That seems to be the case.
Okay, so it's like a detective story, right? You get to piece together all these different factors, these different clues to really understand what's going on.
Yeah, kind of.
And speaking of factors, the study also looked at water quality, which, come on, that's got to be, like, crucial for the health of the shrimp and the fish. So what'd they find there?
Well, water quality, it's way more than just like how clear the water looks, right?
Oh,
You got
good.
your salinity, you got temperature, you got pH levels, all sorts of things. And all of that has a huge impact on whether those shrimp and fish are going to thrive or not.
Gotcha. And I'm sensing a theme here. So mangroves probably have a role to play in water quality as well, don't they?
Absolutely. The research found that areas with more mangroves tended to have much better water quality overall. They're not just nurseries and grocery stores, they're like the ultimate water filtration system, too.
Okay, so they're filtering pollutants, they're keeping the water clean. It's all connected, isn't it?
It always comes back to that interconnectedness. Mangroves, they trap sediments, they filter pollutants, they prevent erosion. They basically help keep the environment stable and healthy for everything, and that, of course, includes the shrimp.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about silvofishery, we've talked about these amazing mangrove superheroes, we've talked about their impact on both types of shrimp production, wild and farmed. We even got into their water purification superpowers. But what does it all mean in terms of this idea of silvofishery? Is it really this perfect solution that everyone's looking for?
Well, I think what it tells us is that, yeah, the goal is to create a balance with silvofishery, right?
Yeah.
But it's a really, really delicate dance. And if you want to get those steps right, you have to understand just how intricate all these relationships are within the ecosystem. You can't just look at mangroves and shrimp separately and call it a day.
You got to look at the whole picture.
Exactly. It's about the entire ecosystem and how everything interacts. And that's actually what makes this research so fascinating. It just brings up so many questions about how we can actually manage these resources, in a way that benefits everyone and everything in the long run.
And we have to remember, it's not just about the shrimp.
Right,
We're
exactly.
talking about entire ecosystems that depend on these mangrove forests. There's the biodiversity aspect, the whole coastal protection thing.
Huge, huge. Those are huge. And those tangled roots we always see?
Yeah.
Those aren't just for looks. They're actually acting like nature's buffer. They absorb wave energy, so they're protecting the coastline from the full force of storms and erosion.
Like natural seawalls, basically.
Exactly. Protecting communities, holding back the tides, the whole 9 yards.
And don't forget, they're also really good at capturing carbon dioxide.
Oh, absolutely. Can't forget about the climate change connection.
Right, right. Tell me more about that. How does that work?
Mangroves are like, I don't know, carbon capturing superheroes or something. They can store way more carbon, significantly more than even rainforests.
Wow.
So they're helping to kind of mitigate the whole, the impacts of climate change that we're all feeling.
Okay, so what you're saying is destroying mangroves, it's not just a local problem, it's contributing to this global issue we have with climate change.
Exactly. It's a lose-lose situation, which is why finding that balance, that sweet spot where we can meet human needs but also have a healthy environment, that's really the whole point of this silvofishery concept, right?
Yeah, it's that balancing act again.
Mhm.
And as we've seen from this study, this Indonesian case study, it's not as easy as it sounds. It requires a lot of thought, a lot of understanding about how this ecosystem works.
No, it's definitely not a walk in the park. And it really highlights just how vital ongoing research is and, having adaptive management strategies and, crucially, getting the community involved.
Yeah.
If we're going to make smart decisions about how we interact with these ecosystems, we got to do all of that.
So based on all the research you've done, what are some of the things that we can do, like concrete steps, to move towards a more sustainable model of silvofishery, especially in places like these Indonesian communities that we're talking about? What can they do?
Well, it's tough to say because there's no, one-size-fits-all answer, right?
Right.
Every location has its own unique challenges. But there are some promising avenues we can definitely explore.
Like what? Give me some examples.
One thing is, instead of just focusing on shrimp and milkfish, maybe we could think about diversifying, the types of things that they're raising, the income streams,
Right.
not putting all our eggs in one basket, so to speak. So exploring other types of aquaculture, other species that could thrive in that mangrove environment, that could be a game changer.
I like that, spreading the risk a little bit,
Exactly.
creating a more resilient system. What else?
Education, of course.
Yeah.
That's always, always key, right? Investing in training programs for those local communities, giving them the knowledge and the tools to manage their own resources effectively, that's crucial if you're thinking long term.
Yeah. Empowering people with knowledge. I like it.
Yep.
Make them the stewards, the protectors of their own backyard.
Exactly. And we can't forget about technology either.
Ooh, good point.
There's so much potential there. New tools to monitor water quality, keep track of fish populations, even help restore damaged mangrove areas. Those can all play a huge role in making things more sustainable.
It's like giving them a high-tech toolkit to
Exactly.
protect their resources.
And of course, we can't forget the government, right?
Sure.
The policies, the regulations, that all has to be part of the equation. They can provide incentives for sustainable practices, enforce the rules to prevent things like overfishing, habitat destruction, support research. All of that is vital for protecting these resources.
Yeah, they got to step up and be responsible too, right?
Mm.
Because it's not just a local asset, these ecosystems. They're globally important.
100%. This has to be a global effort. We're talking governments, we're talking communities, we're talking scientists, we're talking even consumers like you and me.
Yeah, we all have a role to play in this.
Yeah.
So how can we, like as individuals, make a difference? Because sometimes it feels like, what can I do? It's such a big problem.
It can feel overwhelming, for sure. But even the small things matter. Like when you're at the grocery store, be mindful of the seafood you buy. Look for those sustainable seafood certifications. That can actually make a real difference.
So those labels, they actually mean something.
They do. They really do. They're telling you that, the seafood you're about to eat was either caught or farmed in a way that minimizes the environmental impact that supports a more sustainable system overall.
Okay, so I can definitely do that. I can pay attention to that. What else?
Talk about it. Tell your friends, your family, about mangroves, about sustainable seafood, about the challenges, that these ecosystems are facing. The more people who understand what's at stake, the better chance we have of finding solutions.
Knowledge is power. Right.
Exactly.
Support sustainable practices, educate ourselves, educate others. It all adds up.
It all adds up. And, you can always support the organizations that are doing the work on the ground. There are some incredible groups out there that are dedicated to protecting and restoring mangroves all over the world. Even a small donation, it can make a big difference.
So even though we're talking about some pretty big challenges here, there's still hope, right? Like we can actually do something about this.
Absolutely. We all have a part to play in ensuring that these ecosystems, these vital ecosystems, that they're still around for future generations.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah.
But before we, get too carried away with the whole, like, we can do this rah-rah thing, there was one thing from this research that kind of stuck with me.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
The study mentioned that, and this was interesting to me, that sometimes mangroves, they might not actually be the limiting factor for shrimp production.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's other things, like how much nutrients are available or how they're managing the shrimp ponds that are actually more important.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It just goes to show how complex these ecosystems really are. There's so much we still don't know.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
It is. It is.
Just when you think you've figured it out, there's a whole other layer of complexity.
That's science for you, right? It's an ongoing process, always discovering new things, refining what we thought we knew. And the more we learn, the better equipped we are to actually make smart decisions that benefit everyone.
It really makes you realize that we have to stay curious and be ready to adapt, as we learn more.
100%. It's a constant process of discovery. Speaking of learning, was there anything from this research that really stood out to you? Like, what was your biggest takeaway?
What really struck me was it's subtle, but they really emphasize thinking long term,
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's easy to get caught up in the immediate problems, right? Like, how can we squeeze out more shrimp this year? How can we fix this water quality issue right now? But this research, it really makes you step back and think about the bigger picture. Like, what does this ecosystem need in the long run? It's about more than just quick fixes.
It's about thinking about the future, right? The decisions we make today, they have consequences down the line. It's about stewardship, about, what kind of planet are we leaving for the next generation?
Exactly. We have a responsibility to take care of this planet, to be good stewards of these incredible ecosystems. We only get one.
Right, absolutely. And that means we need a more holistic approach, one that recognizes that everything's connected. And we also need to make sure these ecosystems are resilient because change is inevitable.
Especially with climate change and all these other global challenges. Change is the only constant, it seems.
It is. Finding a balance now is great, but it's not enough. We need to build systems that can adapt and thrive, even when things are uncertain.
So it's a journey, isn't it?
It is.
Constantly discovering new things, adapting, collaborating.
Absolutely, but it's a journey worth taking.
Couldn't agree more. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of mangroves, shrimp, and silvofishery in Indonesia.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of ground today, from those amazing mangrove forests and how ecologically important they are, to the whole issue of balancing economic development with protecting the environment.
It's a tricky one.
It is, for sure.
Yeah.
But we've also seen how interconnected everything is
Hmm.
and how important it is to think about the long-term impacts of our actions. Absolutely. And I hope our listeners learned a lot today about these incredible ecosystems, about the challenges they're facing, but also the opportunities that are out there.
I like to think so. And remember, even though the challenges are real, there's always hope. If we work together, if we come up with innovative solutions, and if we all commit to sustainability, we can create a better future for mangroves and for all of us.
Beautifully said. And on that note of cautious optimism, I want to thank you all for joining us today on this deep dive into the heart of Indonesia's mangrove forests. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, every action, big or small, it makes a difference.